Hey everyone, you won't believe the story I have to tell you today. It's about how an arrogant administrator tried to ruin my family's life without having any idea who he was messing with. But before I start, if you like epic revenge stories against authoritarian people, give it a like and subscribe to the channel because this one's going to be good. It all started 2 years ago when I finally achieved my life's dream, buying an apartment with a private pool. After 15 years working as a civil engineer and investing in real estate, I managed to acquire an incredible penthouse at Sunset Gardens building, one of the most luxurious in the city. The apartment had 3,200 square feet, a terrace with panoramic views, and, most importantly, a 430 square foot private pool. When I signed the contract, the broker guaranteed that the pool was for exclusive use of my apartment. Everything was regularized and stated in the deed. I had paid 30% more for the property precisely for this private leisure area. My wife Sandra and our 2 children, 8-year-old Lucas and 12-year-old Amanda, were thrilled. Finally, we would have our special little corner to relax. The first months were perfect. The kids loved swimming after school, I relaxed in the pool after stressful days at work, and Sandra organized small family gatherings on weekends. Everything was going wonderfully until, on a Saturday morning, while the kids were playing in the water, the intercom rang. It was Julio Mendonça, the building administrator, a man about 55 years old, always bad-tempered, who treated the condominium as if it were his personal kingdom. He came up to my apartment with a serious expression and said he needed to urgently talk about the pool. "Mr. Roberto," he began, "we're receiving constant complaints about the noise from your pool. The neighbors downstairs are bothered by the sound of children playing and the noise from the filtration pump." I explained that the pool operated within the hours allowed by the condominium from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and that the children only used it on weekends and holidays. But Julio didn't want to hear explanations. "Look, you may have rights to this pool on paper, but you can't disturb other residents. If complaints continue, I'll have to take more drastic measures." And so began what I call the pool war. Julio started finding fault with everything. The following week, he appeared saying the watercolor was suspicious and demanded laboratory analyses. I spent $800 on tests that proved the water was perfect. Then it was time to question the pump's electrical installation. I had to hire an electrical engineer to make a technical report, another $200. The report confirmed everything was within safety standards, but Julio didn't stop. He started appearing on my balcony without warning, always with absurd excuses. I came to check if there are no leaks. I need to measure the noise level. I received a complaint that you're using irregular chemicals. The worst was when he installed a decibel meter in the downstairs neighbor's apartment, claiming he needed to scientifically monitor the noise level. Imagine, even the sound of water droplets falling on the pool edge was being measured as disturbing the peace. The last straw was on a sunny Sunday when we organized a small birthday party for Amanda. We were only 8 people: my family, my parents, and Sandra's grandparents. The children were having fun in the pool. Adults were talking quietly on the terrace, ambient music at minimum volume. At 2:30 p.m., Julio appeared like a hurricane, accompanied by 2 building security guards. He was red with rage and shouted in front of my entire family, "The foolishness is over. That pool is causing unacceptable disturbances. From now on, pool use is forbidden on weekends and holidays. During weekdays, it can only be used from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and without children." My daughter Amanda started crying. My parents were embarrassed. Sandra was furious, but the worst was yet to come. "And there's more," continued Julio. "I'm going to call an extraordinary assembly to discuss the possibility of permanently sealing that pool. I already have support from more than half the residents." At that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't just about the pool. It was about dignity, respect, and the right to use what I had worked so hard to achieve. On Monday, I called my lawyer, Dr. Marcelo, a specialist in condominium law, and told him the whole situation. He advised me to document everything, times of the administrator's visits, recordings of conversations, when possible, photos of measuring equipment, copies of all notifications. But I had the feeling that something was very wrong with this story. Julio was investing too much time and energy to end my pool. This wasn't normal, not even for an authoritarian administrator. I started investigating more about the Sunset Gardens building and discovered interesting information. The building had been constructed by Mendonça and Sons Construction Company. The surname wasn't a coincidence. Julio Mendonça was the son of the deceased founder of the construction company. I discreetly talked with some older residents and discovered that Julio wasn't just an administrator, he was also a real estate broker and had a property management company. Even more interesting, several apartments in the building were being sold by him. That's when I decided to do a deeper investigation into the legal situation of my apartment. I hired a clerk to do a complete search of the property registration at the registry office. And that's where I discovered the first bombshell. There was a strange clause in the original deed of the land. The land where Sunset Gardens building was constructed originally belonged to the Mendonça family, but had been sold to the City Hall in 1987 for a popular housing project that was never executed. In 1995, the land was auctioned for property tax debts, and guess who bought it? A company called RG Investments. RG Investments, RG, Roberto Garcia. That was my name before I got married and adopted my wife's surname. I had bought that land almost 30 years ago when I was still young and starting my career as an engineer. At that time, I bought several plots at auctions, some to build on, others as long-term investments. I ran to my office and searched through all the old documents. There it was, the auction deed for the land, dated March 15, 1995, in the name of Roberto Garcia, myself. I was the legal owner of the land where Sunset Gardens building was constructed. But how was this possible? How had I bought an apartment on land that was already mine? The answer was in a small clause in the apartment purchase contract. Mendonça and Sons Construction Company had built the building using a surface rights contract, paying a monthly fee to the landowner, that is, to me. During all those years, my investment company received monthly a value of $8,500 as land occupation fee for Sunset Gardens building. But I had never made the connection. My accountant handled everything, and for me it was just another old investment that yielded dividends. When this reality became clear, I laughed alone in my office for about 10 minutes. Julio Mendonça, the arrogant administrator who was trying to ruin my life, didn't know that I was, in fact, the owner of the land where his family had built the building where he himself lived. But I needed to confirm some legal details before acting. My lawyer, Dr. Marcelo, was euphoric when I explained the situation. He confirmed that as landowner, I had the right to terminate the surface rights contract at any time, as long as I paid due compensation. More importantly, as surface right holder, Mendonça and Sons Construction Company, which had gone bankrupt in 2010, had never properly transferred the rights to the condominium. Technically, all residents, including Julio, were illegally occupying land that belonged to me. During the following 2 weeks, while Julio continued his persecution against my pool, I silently organized all the necessary documentation. My lawyer prepared a complete dossier with original auction deed of the land surface rights contracts, payment receipts for monthly fees, complete history of the construction company, current legal status of the condominium. I also discovered that Julio had several pending legal problems. His property management company was being investigated for mismanagement of other condominiums and had 2 lawsuits for abuse of authority pending in court. During this period, he intensified the persecution even more. He installed cameras pointing at my pool, started finding my family for invented infractions, like leaving wet flip-flops in the hallway, and inadequate transportation of pool equipment, and went as far as trying to prevent the delivery of chemicals for water treatment. Finally came the day of the extraordinary assembly that Julio had called to decide the fate of the disturbing pool. He had made a real convincing campaign among residents, spreading that my family was inconvenient and that the pool was devaluing the building. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday at 7 p.m. in the party room. Julio arrived with a PowerPoint presentation, decibel charts, photos of my pool from angles that made it look bigger than it was, and even recorded testimonies from residents complaining about noise. Residents of Sunset Gardens, began his speech. We are here to definitively resolve the problem of apartment 1201. The Garcia family has systematically disrespected the norms of harmonious coexistence in our condominium. He spent 40 minutes presenting evidence against my family. He showed noise measurements, alleged infiltration risks, mentioned possible devaluation of other apartments, and even insinuated that the pool could attract urban pests. Therefore, concluded Julio, I propose that this assembly approve the definitive sealing of the pool in apartment 1201, with all costs being borne by the owners of said apartment. When it was my turn to defend myself, I calmly stood up and said, Residents, before you vote, I would like to share some information that might be relevant to this decision. I put my laptop on the table and connected it to the projector. The first image that appeared on the screen was the land auction deed, dated 1995, with my name highlighted in yellow. This is the deed that makes me the legal owner of the land where this building was constructed, I said, while a murmur of surprise took over the room. Julio turned white, completely white. You're seeing here, I continued, pointing to the documents, that 30 years ago I bought this land at a public auction. Mendonça and Sons Construction Company, a company from our administrator's family, built this building using a surface rights contract, paying me a monthly fee of $8,500. I showed payment receipts from recent years, signed contracts, all legal documentation. During all these years, I religiously received this fee, without knowing exactly where it came from. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that my own administrator, who is trying to seal my pool for disturbing the condominium's peace, is actually living in a building constructed on my land. The room exploded in simultaneous conversations. Some residents seemed confused, others indignant, a few laughing at the situation. Julio tried to speak, but his voice came out shaky. That has nothing to do with the pool issue. Even if it's true, it doesn't change the fact that you're bothering the neighbors. Oh, it doesn't change anything? I replied, still calm. Then let's see if this changes something. I showed the next image, an official notification of termination of the surface rights contract, already filed at the registry office that morning. Residents, as provided by surface rights law, as landowner, I can terminate this contract at any time, paying due compensation. This notification gives you 90 days to negotiate a new form of occupation or, well, find another place to live. What happened next was total chaos. Residents shouting, Julio trying to argue that I couldn't do that, people grabbing their phones to call lawyers, others crying, thinking they would lose their homes. Calm down, I shouted, asking for silence. I have no intention whatsoever of removing you from your homes. You are all my neighbors, and some are even my friends. But there's one person in this condominium who has made my life hell for the past few months, and it's time to resolve this. I looked directly at Julio. Mr. Mendonça, for months you have persecuted me, humiliated my family, invented non-existent rules, and transformed our home into a hostile environment. All this while living in a building constructed on my land. So here's my proposal to all residents. I immediately withdraw the termination notification, sign a new surface rights contract with permanent rights for the condominium, even reducing the monthly fee by half. In exchange, you remove Julio Mendonça from his administrator position and guarantee my right to use my pool in peace. I never saw an assembly resolved so quickly. The proposal to remove Julio was approved by 47 votes in favor and only 2 against, his and his wife's. The new surface rights contract proposal was approved unanimously. Julio still tried to argue, "You can't do this. I know condominium laws, this is persecution." That's when Mrs. Margarita, a 70-year-old lady who lived on the second floor, stood up and said, "Persecution is what you did to this family for months. They've always been exemplary neighbors. and you turned their lives into a nightmare out of pure arrogance. Other residents began reporting situations where Julio had abused his authority: excessive fines, privacy invasions, favoritism for some, and persecution for others. The following week, Julio handed over the keys and condominium documents to the new administrator, Mrs. Rosa, a retired bank employee whom everyone respected. He also moved out of the building, claiming he couldn't continue living in a hostile environment. The new surface rights contract was signed, guaranteeing permanent rights for all residents with a 50% lower fee. With the savings generated, the condominium managed to make several improvements that had been pending for years. My pool returned to normal operation. The kids went back to swimming peacefully on weekends. Sandra resumed her family gatherings, and I could finally relax in my own home. But the story doesn't end there. 2 months later, I received a call from Dr. Marcelo, my lawyer. He was laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Roberto, you won't believe what I just discovered. Remember you had doubts about why Julio was so interested in causing problems?" "Yes, I always thought it was strange. So much effort to end my pool." "Well, I got information through a colleague who works with real estate law. Julio was negotiating the sale of his apartment to an investor who wanted to transform it into 2 smaller apartments. But the buyer would only close the deal if he could also acquire the rights to your pool area." "How so?" "Simple. Julio was trying to force you to give up the pool so he could sell it along with his apartment for a much higher price. He already had everything arranged, including renovation projects. The pool would be transformed into the private leisure area for the 2 new apartments." I was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. So he was trying to steal my pool to profit from it? Exactly. And the most ironic thing is that as landowner, you would have the right to veto any significant structural modifications to the building. He never would have been able to do the renovation he was planning. Folks, this experience taught me several important lessons. First, always keep your documents and maintain organized records of all investments you make, even old ones. I almost didn't discover I owned the land because I had no idea of the connection between my 30-year-old investments and my current life. Second lesson, authoritarian people are often hiding something. Julio's excessive persecution wasn't just arrogance, it was greed. He was willing to destroy a family's harmony to achieve an illicit gain. Third, document everything when facing situations of power abuse. All the photos, recordings, and records I made during the persecution were fundamental in showing other residents what was really happening. And the most important lesson, sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. I never imagined that my own history would reveal itself as the perfect solution to the problem I was facing. Today, 6 months later, Sunset Gardens building is a completely different place. Mrs. Rosa is a fair and transparent administrator. Assemblies are democratic, decisions are made together, and there's a true community spirit among residents. My pool continues to be my favorite leisure area. Amanda learned to swim backstroke, Lucas is training for school competitions, and Sandra organized a book club that meets monthly on our terrace. Some neighbors who used to complain about the noise now ask to bring their grandchildren to swim on weekends. We discovered that many of the complaints were fabricated by Julio to justify his persecution. But there was still one more twist to this story. Through further investigation, we discovered Julio's real motivation went even deeper than just trying to steal my pool area for profit. It turned out that the Mendonça family had always resented losing their land in that 1995 auction. Julio's father had been forced to sell the original property to the city for a failed housing project, and when it was later auctioned for unpaid taxes, the family couldn't afford to buy it back. For nearly 30 years, they had been paying surface rights fees to what they thought was just another faceless investment company, never knowing that RG Investments was actually the young engineer Roberto Garcia, me. When Julio realized I was not just a resident, but also a significant real estate investor, he started connecting the dots. His investigation into my background revealed the truth. I was the very person his family had been paying rent to for 3 decades. His persecution of my pool wasn't just about a potential sale. It was personal revenge against the man he blamed for his family losing their ancestral land. People, if you made it this far, thank you so much for your attention. This story shows how sometimes life reserves incredible surprises for us. Who would have thought that an authoritarian administrator would discover in the worst possible way that he was messing with the owner of the land where he lived? If you liked this story of justice being served, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I have many other epic comeback stories to tell, and comment below. Have you been through similar situations with abusive administrators or building managers? How did you resolve them? Always remember, knowledge is power, documentation is protection, and sometimes the solution to our problems is closer than we imagine. Here are the key takeaways from this experience. 1. Keep your records organized. Maintain detailed files of all investments, no matter how old. Regular review of your financial documents can reveal forgotten assets. What seems like passive income might be more significant than you think. 2. Document everything during conflicts. Take photos and videos of harassment. Keep records of all communications. Save receipts and official notifications. Build a paper trail that tells your story. 3. Investigate when things don't add up. Excessive persecution often has hidden motives. Research the background of people in positions of power. Look for conflicts of interest and personal agendas. 4. Know your legal rights. Understand property laws and contracts. Consult with specialists when facing complex issues. Don't let others intimidate you with false legal claims. 5. Community power. Building relationships with neighbors is valuable. Transparent communication can win support. Sometimes the solution requires group action. Final thoughts. This experience transformed not just my living situation, but my perspective on dealing with bullies and authority figures who abuse their power. Sometimes the universe has a sense of justice that's more poetic than anything we could have planned. The most satisfying part wasn't just winning the battle over my pool. It was seeing a community come together to reject authoritarianism and embrace fairness. Mrs. Rose's leadership has created an environment where all residents feel heard and respected. And yes, my pool is still my favorite spot to unwind after a long day. Every time I float on the water, looking up at the sky, I'm reminded that sometimes the most unlikely heroes in our stories turn out to be ourselves, and a 30-year-old land deed we'd completely forgotten about. A hug to everyone, and until the next adventure. What did you think of this epic revenge story? Have you ever discovered something in your past that completely changed a current situation? Share your stories in the comments.